All right, back here on Inside Wrestling Radio and up to the interview portion of the program, and it is a thrill of mine today to have one of the true legends in this business on the phone with us, and that is none other than the legendary manager of the Four Horsemen, James J. Dillon. JJ, as everybody knows, is best known for a strategic leader of the original Horsemen that consisted, of course, of Ric Flair, Tully Blanchard, Ole, and Arn Anderson. He guided many wrestlers to singles and tag titles in the NWA. From 1989 to 97, JJ was a front office executive for the WWF before returning to a similar, albeit on-camera role in WCW. Welcome to the program right now, and again, it's a thrill for me, J.J. Dillon. J.J., how you doing, man?
Fine, Ricky. It's a pleasure to be on Inside Wrestling Radio with you.
It's a thrill to have you, and I was telling you before we went on the air here, man, that I have followed your career, pretty much all of it, and just you and the Horsemen and all that stuff, man. It's just amazing all you've done in your career. And before we get started in the interview here, I wanted to congratulate you on being a 2011 Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame inductee. How's that feel?
Well, I think we got a miscommunication there. I am on the board of directors, and I have been active in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame 5-6 years now, but it's a legitimate Hall of Fame. It's a process of nomination by a panel and then a separate group votes, and this year, as you mentioned, the Road Warriors are going in, but I've not yet been elevated to that status, though if the day came, it would certainly be a tremendous honor, but I'm very, very proud to be associated with the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. It's up in Amsterdam, New York. It's the only brick-and-mortar Hall of Fame in existence, and anybody that ever travels to the Northeast up around Albany, New York, it's less than an hour from the Baseball Hall of Fame, and it would be worth a trip by there for any wrestling fan because it's not tied to any federation or any wrestling company, and if you saw the plaques on the wall, you would know that everybody that's there is legitimately a Hall of Famer. I'm going to miss the actual induction ceremony itself. I have a son who's graduating from high school this year, so I'm going to be up in Amsterdam on Friday and for some of the other activities on Saturday, and then I'm going to catch a flight into Atlanta to be there for my son's graduation. So it's kind of a balancing thing for me, but it's such a great event in New York that I wanted to be there at least for part of it.
Sure. JJ, let's get into some of your early career, and a lot of people may not realize it, and in researching you, I didn't even realize that, but you actually started out as a WWF referee way back in Philadelphia back in the day. How did that come about, JJ?
I started as a fan, and my dream was to someday become a wrestler, and as happens with a lot of dreams, they follow many paths, and one of mine was just a chance situation where in a snowstorm in Philadelphia where they used to tape a local weekly television show, the commission referees, none of them showed. Enough wrestlers were there to tape the 1-hour program, and they looked around and, hey kid, can you do it? And of course, I didn't bat an eyelash and did an acceptable job, and they asked me to come back and referee again, and that ended up being about an 8-year thing on a part-time basis. And then from there, I got a chance to have my first wrestling match, and a lot of people don't know that I had over 3,200 actual wrestling matches as a wrestler in my career. So the leader of the Four Horsemen was certainly the pinnacle of my career, but it was really just a snapshot of my career that spanned, considering management and everything, 40-some years spread over 5 decades.
That's amazing, JJ, and that was also a phenomenal statistic I saw there that you just mentioned, the over 3,000 matches. That's a ton of matches, bro. Over how many years was that, JJ?
Actually, that was spread over 20 years, and it involved wrestling and managing and sometimes doing both. Especially with the Horsemen, I was involved in the War Games and some of the other key matches, and then on some of the cards, I would have a special match, challenge match with, say, Paul Ellering of the Road Warriors. And all over an extended period of time, it totaled out to over 3,000 matches.
Just an amazing career. JJ, was it difficult to transition from referee to wrestler and then into managers? And out of the three, what was your most favorite thing that you did in the business?
Wow, Ricky, that's a tough question to answer. I think back as a fan, my ultimate goal was to be a wrestler. So as a fan, just watching, I was a student of the game. I loved it as a fan, continue to love it to this day. And then as a referee, I was in the ring for many of the championship matches during the reign of the great Bruno Sammartino. So to be in the ring with championship matches with Bruno Sammartino and challenges from people like Gorilla Monsoon and George the Animal Steel and Killer Kowalski and Professor Tanaka, and the list just goes on and on. It was an incredible experience to be that close to the action where I could sense the emotion that was taking place in the ring. I could feel the effect that the crowd had on what happened, and that was a part of my overall education, so that when I actually became a wrestler, I think all of that experience made me a better wrestler. And when I got into managing, which again was not something that I had initially planned on doing,
Right.
I like to think I was a better manager because of my experience as a referee, as a wrestler.
Sure, and knowing the business pretty much from every side, going at it from that angle.
Yeah, I cut my teeth with the original regional promotions. In fact, I started my professional career full-time just months before my 29th birthday, which was in the Mid-Atlantic region when Jim Crockett Sr. was alive. So I spent 2.5 years wrestling all throughout North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia. So, when you talk about Greenville, when you talk about Spartanburg,
Sure.
Columbia, on over to Charleston, I'm so familiar with all the towns in South Carolina, and some of the greatest wrestling fans in the world. Wrestling fans are the greatest fans in the world, but certainly fans in South Carolina were special.
Absolutely, and you guys always was a thrill when you would come through this area as well. JJ, being of legendary status that you are, what in your opinion makes a good manager?
Again, another great question, Ricky, and I would, and it varies by individual. And
Sure.
If you look at people that had legendary careers, and I hate to start mentioning names because inevitably you end up leaving out somebody, but.
Right.
People like Playboy Gary Hart, when I first went there, was in the Carolinas, and we lost Gary Hart, who was a great mind and a great manager.
Absolutely.
Homer Odell was there. Sir Oliver Humperdinck we recently lost, but the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, and of course to me, I think the guy that really set the standard for how you're measured as a manager with Bobby the Brain Heenan. But every style, whether it's Jimmy Hart, Bobby Heenan, everybody had their own way and showed that they could be successful with that style. And I tried to develop my own style, and for me personally, my thing was less is more. I didn't really do a whole lot because I never felt that my role was to be there at ringside and be the center of attention. And I think that was pointed out during the reign with the Horsemen, because you look at that group, Ric Flair, I mean, the Nature Boy, he is the real deal and always was the center of attention. And what made the Horsemen so special was everybody was already a star in their own right at that point, that the group just kind of melded together. Ole and Arn were world tag team champions. Tully was the national champion. So I was fortunate to be the right place, the right time, and I was kind of a catalyst to help further the storylines and help set up the matches and the key matchups. And again, for me, less is more.
Absolutely, and that's a great point, JJ. I think what we kind of call it in the business is kind of stayed in the chair a little bit there, and some of the things that you did, just little small things like the way you guys would cut promos and stuff. Just little things meant a whole lot, and the business was, as you well know, a ton different back then than it is today. JJ, we're up on a break right now, but when we get back from the break, you recently wrote a book, and I want to talk a little bit about that, and I also want to talk more about the Horsemen and also your time in the WWF. So we'll get into all that when we get back right here with legendary JJ Dillon on Inside Wrestling Radio. All right, back here on Inside Wrestling Radio. On the telephone with us today, we have the legendary J.J. Dillon of Horseman fame, and we were talking about his early career before the break. And J.J., we had gotten up to, you had written a book recently, and that is Wrestlers Are Like Seagulls, From McMahon to McMahon. J.J., what's the idea and the tone of this particular book, and what's that title mean, Wrestlers Are Like Seagulls?
It was actually published in 2005. It is my autobiography, and I was introduced by a mutual friend to Scott Teal, who is my co-author and the publisher, actually, of my autobiography. And when I was first approached, I really didn't have any interest in telling my life story, but I had children late in life when I went to work for what was then the World Wrestling Federation. I married and had 3 children, and I was actually retired from the ring at that point. So here's a situation where I had spent so big a part of my life, and the more I thought about the idea of being able to sit down and be able to tell the whole story and have it in print, whereas the years passed, my children would be able to look back and be able to read in great detail a retrospective of my entire career. And that was actually the motivation for me. And it's not available in bookstores, so you got to do a little work to find it. If you go to my website, which is jjdillon.com, you'll see it at the top of the web page, the main page, and you can go there and get more information about it, and it can be ordered there. It's also available on Amazon.com too. Anybody that orders it actually through my website, which it takes you to right to Crowbar Press, you're ordering it from the publisher. I offer to sign copies, personalize them if you want them, for anybody that wants to go ahead and get the book. And without going into a lot of detail here about it, if you go to the review section of people who have have ordered the book, read the book, I think that the biggest selling point for me is the fact that the people who have read it, and some of them look at it as a history of modern wrestling since I started as a fan back in the mid-'50s and was there through the many changes of the regional territories, to how cable television changed everything, to being in management with both the World Wrestling Federation at that time and WCW with their final days. So it's from a unique perspective of being on the inside through this whole time. And also it's kind of been called a Wrestling 101 textbook that explains how the wrestling business was structured, how promotions made money, how wrestlers made money, because they were all independent contractors. And even if you're not a wrestling fan, I've had a lot of people who the wrestling family and the fan and the family picked it up and then was there, and the wife picked it up and started reading it, and maybe not necessarily a die-hard wrestling fan, and it's a feel-good story about a 16-year-old kid that discovered professional wrestling on television, fell in love with it. That was his dream, and with a lot of help from a lot of people on the way, and a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, and like I say, a lot of luck too, being in the right place at the right time. I ended up really enjoying a wonderful career. Well, I never lost sight of the fact that I was never the most gifted. I wasn't blessed with a body like a Hulk Hogan or an Ultimate Warrior or a Lex Luger, but nobody wanted it more than I did. Nobody was willing to work any harder, and as with anything in life, you're going to have disappointments, you're going to have setbacks, and if you overcome those, don't allow them to deter you from your ultimate goal. That's the wonderful thing about living in this tremendous country that we live in. And we've got difficult times right now, but it is a land of opportunity. And if you have a passion for something and you're willing to work hard enough, you can almost accomplish anything. And I'm living proof of that.
JJ, let's talk about the Horsemen a little bit. They are arguably the greatest stable of all time, and in my opinion, they are the greatest stable of all time. How did the Four Horsemen come about?
It was just a freak thing. We were providing programming for Turner Broadcasting at the time, and we were on every Saturday at 6:05, and there was a couple hours of programming. Plus, Crockett had a syndicated program that was in just about every major market in the country. So it was a lot of television exposure. When you're on every week, we would mainly focus on, the live events where we were going to be appearing on that given week. Whatever the current feuds were, get into the details and the emotions of that, which is, I think, what set that particular era apart, because there was a lot of motion and there was this diverse cast of characters. But at the time, Flair was the world champion. As I said, Tully, I think, was national champion, and Ole and Arn were tag champions. So they had all the belts and all the bragging rights. And actually, initially, I was just managing Tully Blanchard. I think we had some time left and went out on camera, and they said, well, just everybody go out there and talk about whatever you want to talk about. And I credit Arn Anderson with being the one that, when the mic came to him, just telling the fans at home, take a good hard look at this picture, because never have so few wreaked so much havoc on everyone around them. You'd have to go back in history to the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse and held up four fingers. And it was just a passing comment. And the next time I just went out there, even though it was a small studio audience in Atlanta, and a lot of them were kids, they picked up on it. They were the ones, and it was Four Horsemen, and holding the four fingers up kind of made it an interactive thing where they got involved. And then we saw it in the live events when we would would go to the ring, the fans would hold up the four fingers, even if they weren't within shouting range to have a conversation. And it was really a couple weeks before we realized that this was something very special, something that the fans had created, and it grew from just that simple idea.
JJ, what was your favorite incarnation, and there were many of them, of the Horsemen? Who was your favorite group?
Wow, the original Horsemen, of course, will always be special because they were the original, as you said. Flair and Tully and Arn and Ole. And Ole was kind of a grumpy character, was late in his career. Ole drew big money everywhere he ever went, but he was not the limousine riding, jet flying, kiss stealing son of a gun that Flair and some of the others kind of liked being looked at, the surrounded Flair. Ole was just a grumpy that always told it like it was. So when Ole moved out of the way, Lex Luger came in, who was relatively young and inexperienced, had a lot of potential, and we had a phenomenal run with him. But following that, Barry Windham came in, and
amazing.
To me, that was, if I had to pick a group that just had it all, I would have to say the group that included Barry Windham, because he was a great talent. He had youth, he had athleticism, he had good looks. The female fans loved him, and in the ring, bell to bell, there wasn't anybody any better than Barry Windham. Just
a phenomenal worker. I mean, he really was just an amazing talent, and I have to agree with you. I think that incarnation of the Horseman was just really something to behold. JJ, we're running really short on time here, my friend. Before we get out of here, I want to touch a little bit on your WWF time. In '89, Vince McMahon hired you at the WWF, then more in a booker role. What was it like, JJ, in your opinion, to be part of the inner circle of the biggest wrestling company in the world?
As I said, I started as a referee, and I started at a time when Vince's father was a member of the National Wrestling Alliance. He was a regional promoter in the Northeast, but because of the area of the country, it was the largest geographical area with the big population centers. So I basically started my career with Vince, and after traveling all over the world and having a great career as a wrestler manager, here I am now, and this is right about the time of WrestleMania 5. So WrestleMania 3 was the big match in the Pontiac Silverdome with Hulk and Andre. It was at a time when the WWF was really enjoying tremendous success. So it looked like my whole career had come full circle, and now here I was, from starting with Vince's father to, being recruited by, Vince Jr. and the place where everybody wanted to be. And I spent 7.5+ years there, and it was a chance to call on all the experience that I'd had on a much smaller scale in the old regional territories, and where I had maybe wore 10, 12 hats before. This company had full-time people whose job was to do what I had done before on a part-time basis. So it was part of a learning experience. Vince is a fascinating guy to be around. I learned a lot from him. It was a great opportunity for me. I grew professionally. But like I said, I married, again, had children late in life, and it involved me having to find some balance in my life, and that caused a little unrest between Vince and I, and it eventually got to the point that I just felt that I didn't want to be there anymore. And I'm one of the few people that walked in one day and said, Vince, I'm going to leave and go do something else, and I didn't have another job. And if you pick up a copy of my autobiography, Wrestlers Are Like Seagulls, and you asked about the title, I'm not going to give it away other than to tell you that the answer to that question is in the book that explains what it actually has a double meaning of Wrestlers Are Like Seagulls from McMahon to McMahon, to see what it's all about.
Oh, fantastic. A little tease there. I got you. Okay. You went back to WCW when they were rising back up, of course, with the NWO and all that stuff. And in the middle of that, JJ, of course, you were playing a commissioner role. But in the middle of all that, they kind of brought the Horsemen back with an incarnation, of course, of Flair, Benoit, Malenko, and Steve McMichael. JJ, is it your opinion, because it's kind of been mine over the years, and I'd really love to hear your insight, do you think they just brought that incarnation of the Horsemen back to bury them because Bischoff was so, in the moment of burying tradition?
Ricky, I really, deep down inside, though I've had issues with Eric Bischoff, because I don't think he's a wrestling person.
Sure.
And that ultimately had a lot to do with leading to the failure of WCW. But I don't think that was his agenda. Wrestling has taken something that's had success and tried to either recreate it or actually prolong it past its point of being viable. It's just kind of the nature of how it is. If you got something that's successful, you ride it as long as you can, and even after it drops, you try to ride it a little bit longer. And I think that was an attempt to go back and try to recapture that magic. And that's one of those things that you heard the statement in the past about something often imitated but never duplicated.
Sure.
And I think that was an attempt to try and duplicate it. And even with the great Ric Flair, it didn't have quite the degree of success that they would hoped it would have when they started the
Sure.
idea.
Yeah, it just didn't have the teeth. JJ, in about 30 seconds, do you ever think TNA will ever be a viable alternative or a threat to the WWE in any way?
I don't know that they'll ever be a threat. I think they're an alternative product, and I think that's been part of their mistake. Is there's a perception among people in business that don't understand wrestling to think that the WWF/WWE is the model for success, and no one will ever be able to do what they've done and duplicate it or do it better than what they do it. So they would have been better off trying to establish their own product, and I don't think they've done a great job of doing that. But for the good of the business, I hope they stay in business, because it's good for wrestling when you have another product and more people that are able to make a living in the business.
Absolutely well said. J.J. Dillon, man, listen, it's been a just phenomenal insight into one of the greatest minds this business has ever known. The book, again, is Wrestlers Are Like Seagulls, From McMahon to McMahon, and you said you can pick that up on your website.
Yeah, please check out jjdillon.com, because there's a lot of old pictures in there and things from my career. And I couldn't leave you, Ricky, without saying thanks for having me as a guest, and also a shout out to all the wonderful, wonderful wrestling fans, because whatever success I enjoyed was because of the fan support of wrestling and of me and my career. And as I said, the fans in South Carolina are some of the greatest in the world, and I never pass up an opportunity to say thank you to them for all the wonderful memories.
Well, thank you so much, JJ, for all you've done in and for this business. Continued success to you, man, and anything we can ever do for you here at the program, don't hesitate to give us a shot. And we'd love to have you back on again in the future, because I feel like we've just scratched the surface on your career and your life.
All right, Ricky, we'll do it for sure.
All right, that's going to do it for the interview portion of the program. Thanks so much to J.J. Dillon. We'll be right back here to close out the show on Inside Wrestling Radio, coming up next.